All right, court's going to call 2019 CR 0631, State of Ohio versus Patrick Monger. Mr. Monger's present. Mr. Croswell's present. Mr. Hardman's present as the special prosecuting attorney from Warren County. Mr. Hardman?
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right. What the court has in its possession is a information in this case on count one. The charge is soliciting or accepting improper compensation. Mr. Croswell, the court believes that you and Mr. Monger have gone over this along with the prosecutor, and the court has a written plea of guilty on the information. Is that accurate?
It is, sir.
All right. So what the court's going to do, Mr. Monger, first it's going to ask you some questions you need to answer out loud. If you don't understand a question, you can ask Mr. Croswell or ask the court. Before we get started, I just want to put on the record, as I told Mr. Hardman, and I told Mr. Croswell, Mr. Monger, I've known you a long time. I think a lot of you and your family. I want to put that on the record. That's not going to influence what happens here, but I want to make sure, Mr. Monger, that you're comfortable with this court hearing your case.
I am, Your Honor.
All right, and Mr. Hardman, I pointed that out as well, and I want to make sure that your office and you are comfortable with the court hearing this case.
You have mentioned that to me, Your Honor, and it is, we are perfectly comfortable with the court hearing this case.
Thank you. The other thing is I want to point out, just for transparency purposes, my former spouse worked for Mr. Croswell about 15 or 20 years in the Claremont County Commission. Obviously, she thinks a lot of you. As a matter of fact, you just took my kids to lunch. You've known them a long time. They like you, and you guys usually meet yearly and have dinner or lunch. And actually, that just took place less than a week ago because my kids are going to be off, one to college and one to work in another city in Ohio. Is that accurate, Mr. Croswell?
It is, Your Honor.
Does any of that, Mr. Monger, concern you about whether the court continues to hear this case?
No, Your Honor.
All right. And then, Mr. Hardman, does any of that concern you or your office if the court continues to hear the case?
It does not, Your Honor.
I know you said in the back that everybody knows Mr. Croswell, but it's a little deeper than that. So I just
understood.
All right,
and I think I'm aware that Mr. Croswell practices in front of you on a regular basis as well. We see absolutely no issue with you proceeding.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Monger, the court's going to ask you some questions again. First, are you a citizen of the United States?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you currently under the influence of any drugs, medications, alcohol, anything that could affect your ability to make this decision this afternoon?
No, sir.
And Mr. Croswell, you've spoken to Mr. Monger today and on other occasions. Are you comfortable he understands the choice that he's making?
I am, Your Honor.
Mr. Monger, has anybody put pressure on you to enter this plea?
No, Your Honor.
Has anybody promised you anything special by entering this plea?
No.
All right. You understand, or you will, that if the court accepts your plea, it's going to order what's known as a pre-sentence investigative report, which is a report that gives the court some guidance on what sentencing factors the court has to consider prior to sentencing. It's important that you're open and honest and cooperative with the probation department when they decide to meet with you, okay?
Yes.
All right. Are you on any type of probation, community control, or any kind of post-release control now in this state or any other state?
No.
Now, Mr. Croswell is your attorney in this case. You understand that?
Yes.
Has he answered all of your questions?
Yes.
And are you satisfied with his advice in this matter?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Monger, I have to ask, you can read and write, correct?
Correct.
And you have read this written plea of guilty, page 1 and page 2, thoroughly, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you have any questions about it?
I do not.
And did you sign it on the second page acknowledging that you understood all this?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Croswell, you signed it?
I did, Your Honor.
All right. And Mr. Hardman, you signed it as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yeah.
Very briefly.
Huh? Or do you want them?
No. I think before you do the plea, do the waiver of indictment.
Well, what I want to do is, the waiver of indictment indicates that I've read him all these rights, and I haven't read him these rights yet. But what I'm gonna do is finish the rights, then do the waiver of indictment, then take the plea. Okay? No, that's okay. Thank you for pointing that out. All right. For the record, Mr. Monger, you're charged count 1 with soliciting or accepting improper compensation. It's a violation of Ohio Revised Code 2921.43A1. It's a misdemeanor of the first degree, and as such, it carries up to a 180-day jail sentence and up to a $1,000 fine. You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
It also, Mr. Monger, relative to 2921.43, and I know that it's on the written plea of guilty, Division E or Section E indicates that a public servant who is convicted of a violation of this section is disqualified from holding any public office, employment, or position of trust in this state for a period of 7 years from the date of conviction. You're aware of that, Mr. Monger?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right. You understand that the court could elect to put you on a period of community control, which is probation for up to 5 years. If you were placed on any kind of community control, the court would order that you comply with those conditions. If you did not, the community control could be violated and you could be incarcerated up to 180 days. You understand that?
Yes.
All right. Now, in addition to the rights we've just gone over that you've acknowledged an understanding to, we're now going to go over your constitutional rights. You understand that you have the right to have a trial by jury of, actually this is a misdemeanor, but typically it's 12 people. You understand that all 12 would have to agree upon your guilt. You understand that?
Yes.
And you're waiving that right this afternoon in order to enter this plea. You understand?
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand that the state of Ohio must prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt on each element of each crime for which you are charged. You understand that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
And are you waiving that right this afternoon?
Yes.
You understand if we had a trial that Mr. Croswell would have the right to question, confront, cross-examine any witnesses who testified against you at trial. Do you understand that you have that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
And are you waiving that right this morning?
Yes.
Or this afternoon? You understand that if we had a trial that Mr. Croswell could subpoena in witnesses that either he thought or you thought could be helpful to you at trial. Do you understand that you have that right?
Yes.
And are you waiving that right this afternoon? And finally, you understand if you had a trial, you could not be forced to testify against yourself at trial. If you elected to stay silent through the whole trial, that silence could not be used against you in an attempt to prove your guilt in this matter. You understand those rights?
Yes, Your Honor.
And are you waiving those rights this afternoon?
Yes.
Do you have any questions at this time?
I do not.
You've had enough time to think about this decision, Mr. Monger?
Yes, Your Honor.
And it's your desire then to withdraw, it's your desire then to enter a plea of guilty to the information, to the count as charged in the information. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
All right. Before you enter the plea, Mr. Monger, let the court go over the waiver of indictment. And it says, I, Patrick Monger, the above-named defendant accused of a violation of Section 2921.43A1 of the Ohio Revised Code, to wit, Count 1, soliciting or accepting improper compensation, a criminal offense which is not punishable by death or life imprisonment, having been advised by the court of the nature of the charge against me and of my rights under the Constitution, hereby waive in writing in an open court prosecution by indictment and requesting consent that the charge proceed by information instead of by indictment. A copy of information has been furnished me, and this waiver is made without threat or promise or hope of leniency, and is my free and voluntary act. Did you get to read this, Mr. Monger?
I did, Your Honor.
Did you sign it?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Croswell?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Hardman, you signed it as well?
Yes, sir.
All right. At this time, then, Mr. Monger, as to the count one, soliciting or accepting improper compensation, a violation of 2921.43A1, a misdemeanor of the first degree, how do you wish to plead to the information?
Guilty.
Statement of facts, please.
Your Honor, from July 2003 to around March of 2018, while serving as the elected Claremont County engineer, the defendant not only accepted compensation for the performance of his official duties other than the compensation that is allowed under the Ohio Revised Code, the defendant accepted valuable services from employees of his office while on work hours that personally enriched him and or his reelection campaign. The defendant agrees that the following services were provided for his and or his reelection campaign by his employees: the transportation of personal furniture to and from his home to Claremont County facilities, the storage of personal furniture during the winter months at Claremont County facilities, partial printing of campaign fundraiser signs with county equipment by county employees, use of county employees and county equipment to perform campaign treasurer duties, and the printing of personal signage. The agreed upon value of these services is $3,000.
Thank you. Anything on those facts, Mr. Croswell?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Let the record reflect that Mr. Monger is making a knowing, intelligent, and voluntary decision to enter his plea of guilty to the information as described. Let the record reflect and the court finds that Mr. Monger has been informed of all his constitutional rights, that he understands the nature of the charge, the effect of the plea of guilty, as well as the possible penalty which could be imposed. The court accepts his plea of guilty at this time and makes a finding of guilty to count one as previously discussed. The court will set sentencing in approximately 30 days. Could you please get a date? Mr. Croswell, are you able to pick a date, Mr. Hardman?
If I could look at the calendar.
You can. Here's one right
I'm
here.
sorry, yeah. I did not know it's coming up here, so I didn't bring my stuff. I can do it till, let's see. Just trying to
Do you think there's a date
I would have it July 29, 30, 31, how that is.
That's not going to be trial
He's in trial.
that
so-
week. Maybe the following week, August 5th, week of August 5th.
Well, can we do, if you want to pick, can we pick August 6th, and I can do a check, and if not, I'll call back and get a different date. Is that
You
okay?
want to call now, or you
Well,
want to? Absolutely.
I can.
If somebody answers, then it'll just be easier to pick a date that we know is good for everyone, barring anything unforeseen.
I know I'm here on that. Okay, so we can't do it the 29th, so let's do it on the, let me see. So we can't do it on the 29th, I could, then I won't do it. Let's do it on like the 13th, and is that okay, 13th of August? Does that work for you? We'll do 26th or 27th of August? 26th or 27th of August?
I hate to go that far out.
Okay,
I have a trial scheduled.
I mean, if they get this thing done, I can do it I can do it 2 weeks on the 15th, 16th.
We can try that. We can try that.
That'll work for me.
Are we in trial of that?
July 15, 16, 17?
I prefer to do it either the 16th, but either the 16th or 17th, I prefer. Just Friday.
Okay. everybody do the 16th?
July 16th. Is there a
You
time
available
that
16th?
you
I can do it
prefer?
early, I mean, if you want to make sure you do it, I can do whatever you want to do.
Whatever.
What works on July 16th? Do you have to worry about that? 10 o'clock?
All right.
July 16th at 10?
All right, sentencing will be July 16th, 2019 at 10 o'clock. I believe too, I have to set a bond, Mr. Croswell and Mr. Hardman. Does the state have any position?
No, we have no reason to believe that our bond would be appropriate in this case.
5,000 OR, condition return to court. Mr. Monger, Mr. Croswell will have to go to the clerk, sign the bond, then he'll have to walk over to probation so that they can set up when they're going to meet with him, interview him, and prepare the report. Let me make sure that I have everything that I need to put into the file. So I have the waiver of indictment. Staple these two together, please. All right, Mr. Hardman, anything else from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Anything from the defense, Mr. Croswell?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Monger. Let me recall 19 CR 0631, State versus Patrick Monger. He has to go to the clerk, he has to go to probation, and then he has to go to the jail to be processed. They haven't processed him yet.
Does he have to do that on a misdemeanor?
That's what Ms. Frick, our chief assistant, is saying he has to do, so yes. Okay?
It's what it is.
I know. All right. So he'll have 3 stops.
Yeah.
Okay?
Thanks.
Thank you.